Welcome back to another episode of the Wonderfully Made podcast. And if you're new here, I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad that you found me. This episode is going to be about prioritizing pleasure. And I kind of feel like there's going to be a part 2 or 3 sometime later because I feel like I still have a lot to learn. But sometimes when I'm reflecting on my life and my past, I think about lessons I wish I understood in my teens and in my 20s. And I think of what I would have told my former self that I now know. I guess I'm hoping to still extract some new lessons from the life I've lived. I try not to regret many things, but of the things I do regret, most of the time it has to do with not prioritizing pleasure. Maybe it's the fact that I'm an oldest child and tend to be cautious, or maybe that's just my tendency overall. But the biggest lesson I feel I learned from adults was all about delayed gratification and sacrifice and discipline. So at any twist and turn in life, if I did anything outside of that, I always felt really guilty or like I was being irresponsible. But as I have kept on living, I have started to have an attitude more focused on the fact that tomorrow is not promised. You could save something beautiful for a special occasion and then lose it before the occasion ever comes. I say this not as an excuse to become reckless or to do away with discipline, but because it's always good to examine our lives and take a closer look at what we prioritize. What's important to us. By me choosing to prioritize pleasure and also joy, I am requiring myself to take a closer look at what I focus on, how I spend my time, the way I use money, the places I go, even the things I read. And with trips, maybe that dream trip is still a little far off, but there are smaller trips that maybe we can take and save for those. And having something to look forward to is always a good thing, but having that smaller trip might bring us a lot of joy until that bigger trip that we're able to take. To me, prioritizing pleasure is giving myself permission to do things for enjoyment rather than for other objectives that we've been taught are more noble, like to learn, to save, to build for the future. Prioritizing pleasure means no other objective has to be tied to what I'm doing. I am simply desiring to have enjoyment. The funny thing is, when you prioritize pleasure, a lot of those lessons and building for the future and increasing the quality of life, they happen along the way anyway. And I think doing things for just enjoyment, it softens us. In a world where sometimes we have to be stoic when we don't want to be, we have to be disciplined when we don't want to be or don't feel like we have enough energy to be. But when we allow ourselves to just say, I am just here to enjoy myself, I think another thing it does is it makes us better company. How many times do you hear people talk about, some people who take themselves too seriously? I think that's because of not prioritizing pleasure in the present moment. Everything doesn't have to be about the future. Right now matters too. Now, if this resonates with you, but you're struggling to think of ways to prioritize pleasure, think about these activities. Eating. How do you approach it? I'm a big fan of eating mindfully, and I'm also a fan of having a very colorful plate just for the variety of nutrients. But sometimes the thing that goes along with eating healthy is maybe keeping things a little plain, maybe not having fun in plating your meal, maybe multitasking that lovely meal with some work because you feel pressed for time. What could do you a lot of good, even if you only get 15 or 20 minutes to really enjoy that meal, is to have that 15 or 20 minutes be completely uninterrupted enjoyment and focus on the food that is nourishing you. Another example, and I use this one kind of a lot on social media, is reading, because I feel that it's really important to read fun stuff, fiction, things that are going to make you laugh or make you think. Everything doesn't have to be a finance book or some sort of other personal development. Now, there's so many genres that are fiction or are not so serious. You have many to choose from, but just saying it doesn't always have to be, I'm learning this to be better because it's not good enough the way it is. Another one is going for a walk at a leisurely pace. And I'm looking at myself on this one because I tend to naturally walk really fast. And I'm often doing like a nature walk or something like that. And I'm telling myself, oh, I'm doing this to reduce my stress levels. But sometimes once I get out there, I start feeling a little competitive and I start wanting to increase my pace. And, if I walk a little faster, I can get an extra half mile in. And that's not always bad, but sometimes it's good to just walk at a leisurely pace and just notice the world around you. I was so excited one time walking in my grandmother's neighborhood, and I noticed a tiny little frog that could have sat on the surface of a quarter. That's how small it was. And I had to be walking and being observant to even see it sitting perfectly still on the sidewalk. It reminds me a lot of children because if you ever go on a walk with them, they take a lot of detours. They have a lot of what we might call distractions, and they mosey. They're just there to enjoy and explore. Another one is to listen to an audiobook or a funny podcast. I tend to like listening to little rom-com audiobooks. Every now and again, I might listen to a thriller or something else, but I'm listening just to kind of get lost in the story and to have like a happy distraction. And I really enjoy that. Another one is not multitasking something you enjoy with a chore. Now, I mentioned working through your lunch break and eating, while you're working. That's one example, but another example is maybe watching a television show you really like, but then you're like distracted by paying bills and cleaning the house. I understand that so many of us are on a time crunch. We don't have a ton of time to spare. So some tasks are going to be overlapping and multitasked, and we may be a little distracted. But if you could pick one activity every single day and very decidedly declare to yourself that you're not going to multitask it, that you're simply going to enjoy that task, you can, I guarantee, improve the quality of your life. I think it's all about taking the scenic route. Yes, I talked about walking and not walking too fast, but I mean the scenic route in life. Not being in a hurry. Actually focusing on the activity that you're doing. Not always looking ahead because the present is basically not good enough to focus on. These are just examples, but I feel it's really important for us to talk about it because the older we get, the more our responsibilities increase. And then we find ourselves weighed down. And it's hard to sort of back out of that feeling and that stack of responsibilities. But consider this. I believe that we are no less deserving of play than children. We work hard. A lot of us are waking up early, staying up late. There's so much to do. And that's why I believe we need to learn to prioritize pleasure. Thanks for listening.